got up to, it's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 lines down. 15 lines down, yeah. So what we're discussing here is the question of whether you, when you divide up a chotzer, well, let's rephrase that. You have a scenario when we jointly own, you and I are neighbors, we jointly own shared land, so like, for example, a shared courtyard, and I want to force you to divide that land so that we each have our own space. Instead of having the shared land, I want to divide it, and we should like to have our space. You know, I'm not interested anymore in sharing this with you. And we said that if there is a minimal size of land, then I can force you, and I can say, right, you know, you've got substantial enough size, so you've each got 4 amos, then that's fine, right? Each got 4, that's what the Mishnah says. But we added a very important rider onto that in the Gemora. Rabbi Birnbaum, that was the first time the Gemora on Aleph, which says that basically this 4 amos for each of them, that excludes the space they need in front of the doorway to basically unload the shopping. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't say shopping quite. It says basically, you know, we're talking about unloading the donkey. You need some space in front of the door. So everyone needs something in front of their doorway for basic stuff like that. And then it's the additional space on top of that we then split in half. In a sense, that has to be 4 amos each on top once you've deducted that 4 amos space around the doorway. And it seemed, we said last time, that those 4 amos are width-wise, they protrude 4 amos into the chotzer, and then the width of the doorway, right? So the width of the doorway, 4 amos to the chotzer in front of each door. So we're basically now discussing various sort of permutations, various cases where they may or may not have the right to those 4 amos. So on that, Rav asked the following question from Nachman: if you have a house that is half roofed and half unroofed, so it's just simply got half the house is covered with roof and half isn't, does that house have the 4 amos in front of the doorway for unloading it or not? Or for unloading this, in other words, for unloading or not. And he said, Amalei says back to him, Ein lo daladamas. Ein lo daladamas. You don't get daladamas. You don't get the 4 amos. You don't get 4 amos. And what is the reason? Because he says like this, Lomi boy kurov milagov. He says not only if the roofed half of the house is on the inside, so he can actually bring his whatever it is, his donkey or whatever inside the inner space. Okay, so in other words, you've got half which is not roofed towards the chotzer, yeah, and the other half which has the roof on further inside. So that means that it's really simple for you to bring your donkey. We explained last week that it's quite clear that they were very happy bringing donkeys into the house. That was not an issue at all. The only problem was a problem of space, and you wouldn't bring your donkey into the house if you have a dining room table and chairs because you have no space for the donkey. Now, if half your house doesn't have a roof on, then clearly you're not using that space for anything more than you would use a chotzer for. And therefore, if you've got your inner, half the house that's roofed is on the, it's further away from the doorway. So then it makes perfect sense why you don't need an extra 4 amos for unloading your donkey outside your front door, because you can bring your donkey into the first half of your house, which hasn't got a roof on. Plenty of space. You're not going to have other stuff there because it's got no roof. And therefore you can put your donkey there to unload it, right? But he says, even if the roofed part of the house is toward the outside, is towards the front door, you can put your donkey inside. That means to say you can bring your donkey through the roof part of your house, where all your precious and expensive furniture is, into the unroofed part of your house at the back of the house, and unload your donkey over there. So you're okay. And therefore you don't need another 4 amos in front of your front door. And therefore you don't get it. So when you're working out how to divide up, whether there's enough space in the chotzer to force each other to divide up, you do not take into account, you don't give the person who's got this funny arrangement with his house, half roofed and half unroofed, you do not give him 4 amos in front of his front door, okay? And although this seems, like a sort of very, specific case that, is it really going to happen that often? It's a real importance, because at the end of the day, You're talking about the rights, that someone has a right to say, we have a shared ownership on land, and I can force you, to go out to part with me, and even if you don't want to. And for that, there has to be a certain minimal space. So it makes a big difference. If you don't have to deduct an area in front of the land before you make that calculation of, how much is sufficient space, makes a big difference. So, well, if you put a roof on, presumably you would assess it at the time when the other guy is pushing for division. I mean, it might, of course, be the guy with only half the roof who's pushing for division as well. It doesn't matter. This is a simple calculation we have to make when we work out. Because it could easily be that he's the one who wants to divide, right? It's a simple calculation we have to make. Is this a space that I can push you? I can push you and say, let's go our separate ways. I presume you would assess it at the moment of division. That would be the logical thing to say. So then it becomes too small. Can he come to the? Can he ask for no. It wouldn't make much sense that he can then go back once they've divided. I know what you mean. He's going to go back and say, right, the division wasn't valid because another debate, and then they have to go back. It's interesting because you could ask that question along a simpler case, right? Let's say something happens to the chotzer, it develops unstable foundations in one corner, so there isn't enough space anymore. There isn't 4 amos each. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure. It seems difficult to see how he can sort of go back on it then. But yeah, maybe.
Can you repeat the question?
What was that?
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. Yossi's question was if afterwards he wants to put a roof on, the guy puts a roof on, a full roof. So can he now retroactively annul or demand the annulment of the chotzer division?
Oh,
that's the question. Because now it's too small. Now it's not, because now he needs space in front of his house for unloading his donkey. Yeah. Good. It's a good point. It's a good question. Yeah. Okay. Let's just see Rashi on this little bit. Rashi's about a third of the way down, maybe a bit more. No, nearly halfway actually. Rashi says got a house, it's half got a roof on, it's open to a court. Does it have 4 amos in the courtyard or not? That was the question. And the answer was not only if the roof part is towards the inside, and the part that's not roofed is towards the courtyard. We say that he doesn't get 4 amos in the courtyard. He can bring his donkey with the burden inside the house and unload it there. Because it's not the way to put vessels, items, whatever in a chotzer. It should say b'chatzi rashash. There's a reference here to an old version of Rashi, which says the half rather than the chotzer. We're talking about inside the house, the half she'eina makor, which is not roof. Even if the roof is towards the outside, the giluy l'tzad pnim, and the unroofed part is inside. Nami eino daladamas. He doesn't get 4 amos. Because he can bring the donkey up to the unroofed part and unload it over there. And therefore, that's why. Yeah, that's what we follow that. Okay. Now, another question that is irrelevant to this discussion. Rav Gemora carries on. Rav Huna asked a question from Rav. I think it's Rav Ami. They changed it to Rav. Yeah, Rav Ami, not Rebbe Ami. Yeah, which means presumably means he's an Amora. In Eretz Yisrael, the Amoraim, I think, are called Rebbe. But if you ever see Rav, you know it's an Amora from Bovel, because Rav is Bovel. If it begins with Rav, like Rav Huna, means he lived in Bovel. Anyway, so he asked Rav Ami, if you have one person in an alleyway who's living in an alleyway, and he wants to turn his doorway to another street, another street. So this scenario is that you have a house, for example, it's located between 2 streets. In those cases, from Erevin, etc., a movui is an alleyway, right? That was the standard. Well, really, the standard setup. We might come on to this a bit later. The standard setup there, of course, was you had your movui, which was your alleyway, and you had chatzeros, you had courtyards open onto the movui, and around each chotzer, is houses. So you have your houses around the courtyards surrounding the movui, the alleyway, right? Now that was the standard setup. Here it seems to be as you got a house, just a house between two courtyards, two alleyways. And what he wants to do is he decides he's going to close up his door that is facing one street, and he's going to open the door facing another street. Pardon? Yeah, he wants to use the other one now. He wants to be part of the other alleyway. So the question is, can the people who are living in this other street, the new street, can they stop him? Can they stop him doing so? Omalei said to him, they can stop him doing so. They can say, we don't want you as part of our street.
This has got nothing to do with your derived recording.
You're right. So the question is, what is the connection with the previous bit? Let's just see the two quick short Rashis on this. Rashi says, you've got the house between, Rashi says there are a house between two alleyways. The other alleyway that he's not used to being there, he can stop him. He can say to them, they can say to him, sorry, we don't want you to be part of our street. Thank you very much. Because we like it the way it is. So the question is, what's the connection between this and the previous Gemora? I presume it's to do with it is to do with ownership rights in the street, if you like. It's similar in that way to the chotzer, right?
I can't understand why would the other residents of Mavoi B, so to speak,
the new one, yeah,
have any say in opening a doorway into the Mavoi?
Very much so, because it increases all the traffic in the street, doesn't it? There's a house, right, that's always had the back of the house onto the street. And let's say there's 3 other houses on that street, okay? And it's like an alleyway, so it's enclosed on 3 sides, okay? So if you open an extra one, it now becomes 4 people, 4 houses. So it's going to increase more donkeys in the street and more people and all sorts of things. So they can say, listen, you've never used it now. There's no chazaka, you've got no rights in our street, and therefore you can't carry on. I think on a simple level, and Mephosh probably say something else, but on a very simple level, that seems to be the connection to the little piece before. So in other words, what do we say about the person who has a house with half a roof and half not a roof? Yeah, he doesn't get 4 amas in the chotzer. Why not? Because he is assumed to be able to bring his donkey inside the house. So he's got no chazaka. He's got no assumption of ownership rights as such to a space in front of his courtyard to unload his donkey. So in a similar way, these people in the other street can turn around and say to him, you've got no rights in our street. You can't start opening a door from your house into our street that you've never been accustomed to use before, because it's not. You're going to cause us problems. It's just you've got no rights on this street. Your rights belong on the other street. If anyone else has any other suggestions that I think that's the simple way of understanding it. They don't own the street, but they collectively can object. Yeah, they can collectively object. 1 second. Because just let's leave that. Let's leave it for the moment, because we're going to come on to similar cases in a minute. So we'll see how maybe we'll come back to it and see if it helps with us later. But that's the simple explanation of it. The Gemara asks a new question, a seemingly new question. So the question is, what is this achsanya? So Rashi learns that an achsanya is a chayil shel melech, an army, a king's army. So basically, what used to happen was the king's army, as they used to go around on their campaigns. If they visited your town, then you had to basically support them and feed them and clothe them and whatever else they needed. That was the deal. bit of a one-sided deal, but that was how it was. So the question is like this. So this achsanya, do you divide up the responsibility? Everyone has to give, it's like a tax. Everyone has to give a certain amount of food to this army, right? The question is, is it divided up based on the number of people? Rashi says, Hadorim Babayis, who live in the house. Or is it based on the number of entrance ways that the house has? In other words, if you have a house with 2 doors, you have to give more to support the king's army food-wise, right? That's one way of looking at it. Or you say, if you've got a house with 10 kids, 10 people living in your house, you have to give more, and there's a greater tax on you to help support the king's army. And he responded, Omalei said to him, because this was another question which Rav Huna must ask Rav Ami, yeah? Omalei said to him, Lefi b'nei Odom mischalekes. It's divided up based on the numbers of people in the house, right?
Poll tax.
Yeah, it's a poll tax. Does anyone find this a bit strange? Go on.
What's the relevance with Ptachim?
Well, there's one question: it's relevant to doorways in the sense that we've been discussing the rights that you have, in front of your entranceways in your house to a certain amount of space in front of the house, and we talked before about how when you divide up a courtyard, we said on the previous Omid, if you have a chotzer and it's got 2 houses and one has 2 entrances and one has 1 entrance, so there are circumstances where we say the father meant to give the one, since he gave the house with 2 doors to one guy, so he gets more space, gets more of the courtyard. So we do see there's a greater power over the chotzer sometimes, potentially for someone who's got 2 doors rather than one who's got 1. But I thought you were going to ask me just a simple question, right? What's it going to do with the price of cheese? Right? What's the difference? How many doors you have in terms of who do the soldiers? So you've got a responsibility to. Oh, but I'm saying you've got a therefore responsibility to.
The more doorways you have, the more people, more soldiers accommodate.
Right. So you have to bring them in. Yeah, because Rashi says, right, Achsanya means you're hosting them, basically. You're hosting them, exactly. So you're hosting these soldiers. So do we say, if you've got more people in the house, you also means you have to host more soldiers, which is also a bit difficult to understand, right? If you've got more people in your house, you've already got less space for the soldiers. Or do you say, if you've got more entranceways, you have to host more soldiers? So you're saying because they sort of congregate by the entranceways, and therefore what you have to sort of look after them more, or you've got to provide for them more almost.
Yeah, I mean, as a member of the town, you're concerned about providing for them, and then you're concerned about cleaning up after.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, you're cleaning up as well.
Or maybe it's just a question of fire safety.
Fire safety.
You've only got 1 door out.
Ah, right. I see.
You're taking
Right.
a bunch of
Right.
soldiers.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting
It's
because
probably a measure of wealth.
pardon, a measure of
Measure of
wealth.
You had a big household, you had servants, you had a big family. At that time, it was seen as someone who was wealthy.
Yes. Ellie's saying,
Therefore
I'll just repeat for the benefit of the crowd. Ellie's suggesting that we have the idea is that it's simply a measure of wealth. In other words, if a person has more people in their house, they're assumed to have greater facilities, in terms of material possibilities of looking after these soldiers, or perhaps because of the entrances they have as well. But either way, you can see it's a bit difficult to understand, and that's why Tosfos argues. Because if you look at Tosfos, very very small Tosfos, the third Tosfos, it's literally like 2 lines. Achsanya, lefip sochim v'cholu. And he brings Rabbeinu Hananel. Can you see that? The third Tosfos, the tiny one. Pirush Rabbeinu Hananel. Rabbeinu Hananel explains, the question of the Gemora is, Shayara shechonto b'mokem echod, a caravan that camps in one place, they're traveling around, yeah? So the question is, right, he says it, right, Hazevel eicholkim. How do they divide up the refuse? The zevel, the manure. So that's the question. The question wasn't about providing for soldiers. It was simply about what do you do for or who gets more of a right to whatever they leave behind that's beneficial for the people in the courtyard. That's what it seems to. That's what it is. That's what it seems to explain. That's what it understands. Yeah.
Zevel is manure.
Yeah. Or refuse.
It's good refuse.
Good refuse. Zevel is what you use for fertilizer. So that's the question. That's the question. And that fits with the continuation of the Gemora. If you look at the way the Gemora carries on, the Gemora says, Tani nami hochi, Gemora means a brisa. Yeah. Zevel shebechotzim is chalekes lebipsachim. The brisa which supports the answer that he gave. The manure in the chotzim is chalekes lebipsachim. That's divided up according to entrance ways. Achsanya lefi bnei adam. And an achsanya is divided up based on the number of people. So in other words, what he's saying is that if you look at Rashi says mischalekes lefi pesachim nezevel sodos to fertilize the fields. So the first bit of the Bryce is talking about the refuse, the manure. I say refuse, but that's incorrect because that implies rubbish you don't want, right? Manure, this what we're talking about, yeah, is something helpful and useful, and that is been cast out of the doorways. They've thrown it out the doorways. Rashi says, it's made a rubbish heap. Okay, so that they divide up. How do you know what you get to fertilize your fields? Based on the entrance ways, because the more exits you have from your house, the more you produce that zevel, and therefore you get to take more of it. Whereas when it comes to achsanya lefi bnei adam, the achsanya is according to the number of people. So Rashi will learn that Rashi says it's talking about achsanya. Achsanya is the amount you have to provide for these soldiers. So the Bryce is supporting what he answered him, what Ravami answered him. That it basically is based on the more people you have in your house. Maybe it's a measure of material wealth, as Eli says. So therefore, that's why you've got to give. That's why you've got to give more if you're more people in your house. Whereas Rabbeinu Hananel will say no. Achsanya means the zevel that they produce. If there are more people in your house, then you get a greater right to that zevel. If there are more people in your house, you get more of it, basically, because you need more of it. I don't think you have to pay more because I think it's just a traveling. It's simply a traveling group of people who have moved into your locality, and they leave behind something beneficial. And we just want to know, how do you divide up what they leave behind? They leave behind this manure. How do you work out who gets it? And the answer is based on the numbers of people in the house. That's how Tosfos learns anyway. But I think the reason why Tosfos learned like this was because it's difficult to understand why it should be that you divide up the way you have to provide for these soldiers based on the numbers of people or the number of doors you have. And also the Gemora flows better because then the whole discussion is about the zevel and it's not about anything else. You know, that's all focused on that. Okay, let's carry on. One person in a movie in the alleyway who wants to stop up opposite his entranceway. So Rafuna says that if you have one person in a movie who wants to, in an alleyway, who wants to close off his entrance, what does he want to do? He wants to put up a fence. So we said that everyone has 4 amos in front of their doorway to unload their donkeys. And this guy comes up with a great idea. You know what? Those 4 amos that were mine, I'd like to build a fence. I want a front garden. I want to build a fence around those 4 amos. This happens all the time, doesn't it not? People decide they want to, they might have shared land in a shared space, and they say, that's fine, but I'd like that little space in front of my garden, yeah? Like in St. Peter's Court over here, right? One of the people say, listen, I want to, do they have fences there? Maybe some do, I don't know, right? Not in the inside courtyard, but you can see this, that's the story, right? Someone wants to build a fence and like, back you don't, what? It's also open, right? But let's say someone did, right? Someone says, I want my little space in front of my house, I want to cut it off, right? I want to build a fence. Are they allowed to do that? So the other people can stop him. They can stop him doing so. Because by doing so, what does he do? He makes it inconvenient. They have to walk around it. You imagine this alleyway. yeah, these houses or whatever. If you build something protruding out of your house, a little fence that cuts off your area, so everyone who's walking down the alleyway to get to the other end of the alleyway where their house is, they have to go around. They weren't very wide, these alleyways, probably. They have to go around your fence. Not good, not fair.
Bike shed or garden shed, put it outside for storage.
You want to put a bike shed or a garden shed outside? Yeah, but it's a problem. It's a problem. This is in the front. Yeah. Yeah, it's in the front, and it's a problem because it's causing a problem for your neighbors. It's obstructing them. So Rav Huna says you can stop them doing so. You can stop them doing so. Yeah. So that's how he paskins. Now the Gemara has a problem with this. Maybe a question from this on a Bryce. So the Bryce says if you have 5 courtyards open onto a movui onto the streets, so the question that the Brisa here is addressing is what usage does each courtyard have in the streets? That's the question. So you've got to imagine, you've probably got a nice picture in some of the answers there, right? You've got five courtyards that are located sort of down the street. And there's one right at the end, because remember, this is an alleyway which is closed, which is only open on one side. There's one right at the end. Now, no one really needs to go down the end except for him. Except for the people who live there, right? The other people shouldn't. There's no need. There should be no need to. And progressively, for each one, as you go further towards the street, right? No one needs to go further than their own courtyard. And the Brisa therefore says, if you have chomesh chateros, they all get to use the space that is in front of the outermost courtyard, okay? Because since they all have to walk past the guy who's next to the street, yeah, next to the opening of the where it opens on the street, they also get to use that space as well. Because the assumption of the Brisa is that if I have rights of way past that means that area of the street, of the alleyway, is a shared space. It's a space that I have as much right to as you, because that part of the alleyway I need to access to get out. Okay? That's what it means, kolom mishtamshus. They can use that space whatever they want. In machitzon. The outermost one, because you have to keep in your mind the whole time, right? They're not using the spaces as we use spaces. Outdoor spaces are like a bit like rooms. They want to use it for all sorts of things. The question is, what rights do I have to use that space? The outermost one, he can only use the space in front of his courtyard. I say him, but it might be a group of people sharing a courtyard, right? Because the courtyards are open onto them. You know, courtyards have houses all around, open onto the street. Yeah. So the chitzona can only use the space in front of its courtyard because there is no need for the people who are closest to the street, the Rosh Hashanah, to go further down the alleyway, down the movui. There's no purpose. Why on earth would they want to do that? All of the others are allowed to, also the ones further inside are allowed to use the space in front of the second one. And the one person number 2 can use the space in front of his courtyard and the one on the towards the street, right? The outermost one. So it comes out that the innermost courtyard can use the space in front of itself, which no one else has access to. No one has his rights over that space. And it can also use the space in front of every other successive courtyard as you go towards the front, the street. Yeah, does that make sense? Yeah.
Potentially sell it at a higher price.
Well, in the one way, it's interesting that I was thinking that which is better in terms of which is going to sell for more money, the chotzer towards the back of the alleyway or the chotzer. So on the one hand, if you like privacy, it's great. The one on the inside, no one can get close to you because no one is allowed to use that space in front of the right area. On the other hand, you want to get out your alleyway, you've got to go past everyone else to get to the street. So.
Yeah, but if you want to set up your own, I don't know,
gazebo, barbecue. You want to have a barbecue, milking machine. Yeah.
Couldn't do it except if you were in the most set of houses.
Well, that's interesting. You're assuming that because he's got that space in front of him, they can do what they like with it. No one else can object. Potentially, yeah. So it would seem they can do what they like. Yeah.
That's it.
Either way, what was that?
It's not only it's not just a single person, is it? Because there can be many people living in the chotzer that leads onto the mavai.
there could be many people living in the chotzer. Yes, that's right. That's right, 100%. Yeah, there could be many people living in the chotzer, which opens onto the Mavui. Absolutely. Yeah, so it's not one
It's
person.
not a private space.
Pardon?
There's not a private space.
It's not a private space. I'm only expressing like
Yeah.
that just for simplicity's sake. But Jeremy's point still stands in the sense that if it's the case that the people who are living on the cul-de-sac end, if you know what I mean, right? The people in that courtyard, they're the only people who have access to that space. They can set up a milking machine there, maybe jointly, a joint enterprise, because no one else can access that. Yeah. Either way, you can see the question on Rav Huna. Yeah. What's the question on Rav Huna? Because Rav Huna said everyone can object. That's what Rav Huna's whole point was. Rav Huna says someone wants. He doesn't make a difference. Doesn't make it specify who. He just says if I build a fence around my space in the Mavui, everyone else can turn and say thank you very much. Yeah, you're causing us a problem. We have to around it and everything else. According to the Brisa, anyone who's further towards the street has got no rights over people who are further towards the cul-de-sac. Yeah, that's the problem. Gemora says Tanai. It's in fact a machlokes Tanoim. So there are two views about this. Earlier views, the two Tanoim. The sign of the Brisa says Echad mei Mavui, shebikish lachse pischol Mavui acher. One person in a Mavui who wants to turn his entrance away to another Mavui, which is what we mentioned earlier, this halacha. B'nei Mavui ma'akvin olov. The people in that street can stop him. They can say, we don't want you to use our space. To now open onto our street. If it was closed, the bikish leposcho. If let's say it was opened up, it was closed, the bikish leposcho, and he wanted to reopen the doorway. Then they cannot object to him. Divrei Rebbe. This is Rebbe's opinion. So Rebbe makes it interesting. There's an interesting addition here in the Brisa to this halacha, which we mentioned before when we mentioned it in a question that went on between two Amoraim about someone has a house between two streets and wants to open it on the other street, right? And we said that they can turn and say, "Thank you very much. We don't want you going in our street. You never had that." But Rebbe, this in the Brisa, Rebbe adds an extra line, and Rebbe says that if he originally had a doorway there, let's say his house had a door to the other street, but they just hadn't used it, and he wanted to reopen that door again. So then they can't stop him. That's what Rebbe says, right? So, what? A door, I think. Yeah, Rashi says clearly he had an entranceway that used to be open, and then it was closed up, and now he wants to reopen that door, that entrance, right? So their claim falls away. What's their claim? Their claim is you've got no rights over our land, over our space. How can you just open a back door onto our street? I mean, there are rules about this, aren't there? Aren't there rules about this? If you want to open a back door from your garden, let's say your garden backs onto a street.
Yeah, so
you can't do that, can you? You need planning permission, no? Or maybe not.
I'm sure you do.
You've got Brent Street down on the right-hand side. You go down there, a number of houses from Charlton.
Brent Street. What have doors?
I think they've got some of the.
No, but maybe they've got an established right of. Are you allowed to open a back door from your garden onto a street? Your planning permission,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, there's loads of silly rules. Like it'll be, it's about also if it's in keeping with if there's a precedent, if it's in keeping with the local
That's right.
area.
Yeah. But it's also logical because you're going to increase traffic. You're going to start bringing things in through the back door and affecting other people, and that's in principle makes sense. Yeah. Anyway, Rishon Elazar says this is the continuation of the Brisa. 5 courtyards that are open to the Mavui, to the street. They can all use the Mavui with each other. They have equal rights over the alleyway. So before we solve how this Brisa supports Rav Huna, so that it's because we're saying it's a machlokes Tanoim, right? Right? We're solving the problem. We had a question on Rav Huna. Rav Huna says that you're allowed. Rav Huna seems to imply that everyone has rights over the whole thing. And we said that we have a brisa which clearly implies that's not the case. You've only got a right over the area you need to access, you need to use. And we're saying, don't ask question Rav Huna because it's actually a machlokes Tanoim. So before we prove and explain how it's a machlokes Tanoim, we first need to solve and understand this brisa, just the meaning of the brisa. The Gemora asks Chatzeros, man dochar shmaihu, courtyards. Who mentioned courtyards, right? Who mentioned that at all? We weren't talking about courtyards. The Brisa starts off, Rebbe is talking about someone opening a doorway to another alleyway. He's not talking anything about courtyards. Why does Shimon Elazar bring in Chatzeros? He starts talking about courtyards and the 5 courtyards on the alleyway or whatever. So the Gemara says, there has to be something missing from the Brisa, and this is really what it should say. Rebbe carried on by saying, 5 courtyards which open to an alleyway, they can all use together with the outermost one, and the outermost one gets to use just its own space, and he can't go further in towards the other end of the cul-de-sac. In other words, Divrei Rebbe, that's Rebbe's view. And Rebbe would be the author of the Brisa that we brought before, Chomesh Chatzeres, and on that, Rebbe Shimon Elazar Omer, Shimon Elazar says, Chomesh Chatzeres, 5 courtyards open onto a Mavui, Kulam Mishtamshus Mavui. They can all use equally the space in the Mavui. In other words, what we're saying is that Rebbe and Rebbe Shimon Elazar debate this very point about whether you have equal rights over an alleyway or you only have rights over the space in front of your chotzer, yeah, and any other part of the alleyway you need in order to exit. That's the debate, right? One view holds there's no such thing. Yeah, if we have 5 courtyards, let's say, opening onto a shared cul-de-sac, we all get equal use of the cul-de-sac, right? And that is the view of Rav Huna. Rav Huna follows that view of Rabbi Shimon Elazar. Rebbe and the Brisa we brought before say no, you only get the rights over the part of the cul-de-sac that you need to use, either for leaving the cul-de-sac or because it's in front of your chotzer. Yeah, that's so that's how we've resolved Rav Huna. Yeah. 1 second. Okay, let's see Rashi on this. Rashi is about 3/4 of the way down. Shabikish Listom, we did that one. I don't think we did that. No, we didn't do that. Shabikish Listom Keneget Pischo. Yeah, he wanted to close up in front of his entrance. He wants to put a wall around the 4 amos in his alleyway opposite his entrance. Shemar ba'alei maderech shaholech miroshay ad letzad sofo. Sorech lahakif soviv hamachitza. He needs to go around the machitza. That was their objection. Their argument was, hold on a minute, because of this, we're going to have to go around it. We don't want that. 5 courtyards open to the Mavui, one after the other. The Aruch went down the length of the alleyway. Alleyways are assumed to be closed up at the end. And one of the exits was open to the street. That's how they used to design. That's how they designed them. They can all use the Mavui together with the outermost one. Connect the opposite it. They've all got rights in the Mavui to go out that way towards the end of towards the Rosh Hashanah. The rule is, says Rashi, that anyone who's got a pathway, a need to go that way out, has got the ability to use it as long as that usage does not restrict other people, basically.
We understand that Chatzeros we use for lots of activities, but was the Mavui also used for people, like, I don't know, drying their washing or drying their, could you use the Mavui? I'm not sure what's the status of the Mavui. Is the Mavui a part of the sort of the public land?
Yeah, very good question. So Jeremy's asking that it's not entirely clear what the status of the Mavui is. We understand that everyone had usage of the Chotzer, and the Chotzer was a kind of communally shared space that people would use for all sorts of things. But what was the Mavui for? And what did that work? And how do we see that you've got rights in the Mavui? So you're basically coming close to Tosfos' question. So let me come back to it in a second. Let's just finish Rashi, because there's an interesting Tosfos here about this. Connect the opposite, the outermost one. The width of the Mavui, but the outer one can't use the space in front of the other ones further in because it's got no rights away there. It can use it by itself. The problem we were asking this on Rav Huna is, he says all of them can object. Rav Huna says even the outermost ones can object to the innermost ones. So we solved it by saying that it's actually machlokas Rebbe Shimon Loza. And the price that we brought said, he originally had an entrance, and he closed it up. After a time, he decided to open it again. They can all use the alleyway, the whole alleyway. Even the outermost one can use the innermost one. Right. So that's how we resolved it. We said basically Rav Huna's din is actually a machlokas tanoim. Now Tosfos here, if you look at the Tosfos, which with Dira Maskal Echod, Tosfos says, he brings Rashi. Rashi says, what's going on here? The scenario was that someone wants to build walls around the 4 amas that he has in the Movi opposite his entrance. Rabbi Yitzchak has a big problem with this. Jeremy's question. We don't find anywhere that he's got 4 amas in the Movi, in the street. Our whole discussion has been about a chotzer. My house opens onto a courtyard. I need space in front of my front door to unload my shopping. But the street, the Movi, is not the same as a chotzer, right? Why on earth would I get 4 amas? Who says I get 4 amas there? You follow? That's your question. So Rabbeinu Yitzchak says that it would seem that he follows the view of Rabbeinu Chananel. The case was that this guy who wants to build a fence around his 4 amas, he lives at the end of the street, the cul-de-sac end, closed end. What he wants to do is he wants to build a fence at the end of the cul-de-sac in front of his house. You with me? He says to everyone else, I'm the only bloke, I've got a house at the end of the street, right? Why should you care? Right? Why should it bother you if I want to build a fence at the end of the street in front of my patch of 4 amas that I have there at the end of the street? Can you think of just before we see rotations, can you think of a reason why they can object?
No,
he does, because he lives there. I think we're understanding that. He's a house at the end. Presumably they had some variation. So he does. He has 4 amas. The 4 amas he effectively owns. 4 amas in front of your house, you own to unload your stuff. So you basically do own it. So can you think of a reason why they can still object?
It's still entitled to walk up.
Why?
It's still, it's part of the overall. Well, that's the point, isn't it? It's a mob.
Well,
it's not. It's not.
And they don't really need it.
They don't need it. They still, unless you imagine you've got a bunch of kids wanting to play football. Yeah.
So that's getting a bit closer to it.
What if you want to extend the Mavoi?
What was that?
What if you wanted to extend the Mavoi?
Extend the Mavoi? How are you going to? Which direction? Like back?
Well, let's say someone next builds some more houses down the road, and they need to extend the Mavoi. So
you mean further back? You mean they want to extend it back, sort of?
Yeah.
I mean they want to make it longer.
The
new development so that the Mavoi becomes deeper away from the street.
Yeah.
Well, that would be presumably that's a problem if a guy has a house there. I might no.
No. The alleyway is going down the side of the street, right? And you have the Chatzerim leading onto it.
Yeah.
So for whatever reason, it stops at that point. But at some point, they may decide to extend the Mavoi to encompass, as you say, a development that's gone up behind it. In which case, if you've blocked the Mavoi, then you've got the rights over it. Then you've created a blockage in a public space. Right.
So, except I don't know whether I think the argument he would have here is, look, my house is at the end here anyway, so you can't touch my house, right? And I'm entitled to 4 amas in front of my house for my purposes, right? So all I want to do is just put a fence in front of those 4 amas. That's all I want to do. No one else comes here. It's my 4 amas. I use it for unloading. There's a separate question how that works in terms of development rights, and are you allowed to potentially use any of that space, whatever. But he's simply arguing, I'm the only one who lives at the end. I get 4 amas to unload my shopping. Why can't I build a mechitza in front of it?
No,
that's his chotzer, not his.
It's not chotzer. He's got no chotzer. He's got no chotzer. He is a guy who lives directly on the Mavoi.
Where does it say that?
That's what Tosfos implies.
It's creating a private domain in a public area. They have rights to walk
Yeah.
up to his house.
Do they? Well, that's a question. Do they? In a way.
That's not the illustration.
No, the illustration there is based on Russian. I imagine. I don't know. I think it must be. That's what we're doing. Tosfos. Tosfos is giving a different scenario. Tosfos understands that the case that we're discussing, Tosfos has a problem with Rashi because the whole way through the Gemora we've been discussing rights in a chotzer, right? We haven't been discussing anyone having 4 amos in a movui. So therefore, Tosfos says the case is different. Rabbeinu Chaim says the case is that this is one individual who lives in a house right at the end of the cul-de-sac, and he has got a space in front of his house.
And he's entitled only to space when he needs it. The rest of the time, everybody has shared ownership. The whole area of the model.
Everyone has shared ownership of the movui, right?
The point is that they don't have any need for use.
But they don't have a need for his space. That's what he will argue.
What about the layer?
An Eruv. What's the difference?
They don't need. They need his space. But Eruv going down.
Oh no, that's a different. Well, that's a different issue. They don't say need his. I mean, they need his space because they all need to be part of the same Eruv. But that's like a. He's not objecting to being part of the same Eruv, but he just wants to build a fence and have that space at the end for himself.
What happens if one of them invites 100 people to
Yeah. Well.
They wouldn't be able to encroach on the guy at the end.
So this is, you're getting really close now to what Tosfos is saying, what their objection is. Have a look what Tosfos says. V'hashta k'amar Rav Huna. So now Rav Huna says, Shema akvin olav b'nei hamavui. They can stop him building that fence. Everyone else. Why? Aval b'shem chitzonim. Even though they are further out. L'fishem marba aleim es haderech. This phrase, he increases upon them the derech, the way. What does that mean? Pirush regel b'nei odom. People are walking through. Because the people in the alleyway can say, even there are lots of people in the movui. Your example, if someone invited 100 people for Kiddush, so the movui is packed that Shabbos morning, they can say, listen, it's not a problem normally. They can normally go right to the back of the movui, so we've got plenty of space for 100 people for Kiddush. Because you're closing up the end of the movui, what are you doing? You're increasing all the rest of us, the traffic is increased on everyone else, right? Everyone else is going to cause us problems, reduce our space in the alleyway. And therefore they're going to have to, because there's going to be so much pressure, they're going to have to go into the courtyards because of that to relieve the pressure. And then he goes on to give proofs where you find this phrase "mar ba'aleim es haderech" in that sense. Yeah. So
According to Rashi, what is it?
it's not clear. Meaning the scenario according to Rashi is difficult to understand because Rashi seems to explain that he wants to build a mechitza in front of the 4 amos that he has in the movui opposite his entrance. So he doesn't have 4 amos in the movui. That's the problem. Why Tosfos doesn't like Rashi's pshat. How Rashi will answer this is a good question, which no doubt must be discussed and resolved because it's Rashi, right? Because it's Rashi. But that's what. But because of that problem, Tosfos says the scenario is different. The scenario is there's one guy living at the end of the movui, and he wants to say I want to block off my thing, and they say no, you can't, because by doing so you're going to create more pressure. When there's lots of people, they're all going to have to start going into the courtyards. They're not going to be able to. They won't have space. There's no space for them in the street itself. Yeah. What?
I'm finding it difficult to understand.
Why?
Because if he's on the innermost part of the movui,
Yeah.
people are not going there anyway. They have no need to that. There's no need for traffic.
No, but
there.
if one of them makes a big kiddush on Shabbos morning, and loads of people come in the movui, okay, so the place is packed. If the movui it ends 4 amos before it should end, then there's nowhere for them to go. Again, we're assuming, I know the Gemora brought machlokus on this as to whether there are any rights to go there, but again, we're in Rav Huna now, and we're assuming that there are rights to go across the whole chotzer. That's what Rav Huna holds, or the whole movui, the whole movui, right? We're going in Rav Huna. We brought a dissenting view. We finished off that it was a machlokes tanoim. There is a difference of opinion as to whether you've got a right to the whole street or only where you need to go in the street. But we're in Rav Huna. Rav Huna says that everyone has a right to all parts of the street. If everyone has a right to all parts of the street, if I make a kiddush on Shabbos morning, I would like the street to be clear so that all my guests don't have to go into other people's courtyards and then they get annoyed with me. Yeah. Raises lots of questions, doesn't it, about the garden minyanim? Not that I've got anything against garden minyanim, but no, honestly, no, I mean it because, like, really, in terms of like chush and mishpat questions, like usage, like usage rights of the public street and domain, and you say, okay, the council gave permission, but what if, like, what a few of the people are not so happy with people sort of going into the rose bushes and of their, you know what I mean, like brushing the talus through the garden. I mean.
Middle England, I mean.
No, I mean, I'm not honestly, I'm not raising it because I want to. It does raise interesting questions. I imagine that was all mostly it's based on
It's also like all these like.
I mean, it's telling to you, not telling to you, Martin, for any particular reason, but I'm imagining that basically it's based on kind of a mutual understanding. Like for example, Mayfield, there's like I think one non-Jewish resident on the whole road or something. Is that right, Richie? No, something like that. I think they said that, right? So it's based on a mutual understanding, right? That everyone's happy, basically. Yeah.
Also, those the gazebos, right? So how long is it up before it's considered planning consent?
Yeah.
If something is up, I think what is it? 9 years without objection? 5 years.
Yeah.
I think Barnet Council have already sent the letters, David.
They did send a letter. The council did send a letter out,
Which they then withdrew quite quickly.
Oh, they withdrew the letter. I didn't realize.
It's on hold for the moment.
Oh, it's on hold, right? Okay, well, it's on hold till June 23rd.
Pending.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Anyway, no, I'm not raising it from a sort of council perspective. It's just from this discussion is really directly relevant to that question because you can clearly see how increasing numbers of people in a place always has a knock-on effect on the surrounding residents, right? It does. Yeah. By definition.
There's similar shilas with building on the roofs in air rights in Israel. So, for instance, if you have a penthouse apartment and there's no one above you and you have the air rights, are you allowed to then build another apartment on top? And do you need permission from everyone else? And yeah,
and then they have that deal they do, right? Where they what do they call it?
Tab of 36.
Yeah.
No, okay, that's
everyone gets the they close up all the balconies, then you get the extra room. My brother-in-law did that in his apartment. They got an extra.
I mean that's legal and above board. That's but
yeah.
But when they take basically the air rights, and are you allowed to build another apartment if no one else is losing out?
Yeah. That's right.
Oh, you can tell your English, Richie, because you're asking the question. So just,
yeah. Yeah, there we are. Anyway,
in the right direction, David.
What was that?
I said I'll put you in the right direction, David.
Thank you,
Okay. So on this point, we've just got a few more lines to clarify this detail about the doorway. So we mentioned the doorway that's open to another street, yeah, where basically you haven't got a right to open that doorway unless the doorway there was originally a doorway there. So you're reopening an original doorway. Omar, so we're re-quoting that statement. Sosum from this price. Sosum if it was closed, and they wanted to open it, right? So the other people in the street can't object. They can't object. Omar Rabbi says, it's not so simple. It has to be that the door frame, the imprint of the door is still there. If you remove the door completely onto the other street, so there was just a blank wall there, that's basically where there's no evidence there was ever a door there. Look at Rashi. Rashi has when he closed off the entrance, he never removed the doorposts and the lintel and the door threshold. The Goli died. He's shown that he never removed himself. The sofa, the post, he always intended to reopen that door at some future date. Then they can't object if he chooses to do so. If he removed the door frame, right? Then the other people in the street can say, hold on a minute. The very fact that you removed the door frame means that you never intended to reopen this doorway again, and therefore you've removed yourself from us. There's a brisa which supports you in this respect. The brisa says, top of the next, a sealed house has 4 amas. So the case is, Rashi says, this house had a doorway, an entrance to a chotzer, and they closed it off. So if one of the houses, for whatever reason, has no door to it, I don't know why I'm using it as a storehouse, there's got no door, it still gets 4 amos rights when you divide up the chotzer, as if they had a door that was open, okay? Because there's at some point they're going to want to get into it, and therefore it still is assumed to have 4 amos ownership rights in the chotzer. This, I think, means Rashi implies that we're talking here about the 4 amos you get, like the 4 amos of the Mishnah. When we work out how much there needs to be, divide up the chotzer, you're going to get 4 amos, I'm going to get 4 amos. This sealed house also gets 4 amos. However, Torah says Petzimov, if they remove the door frame, Eino Daladamas doesn't get Daladamas at all, because once you remove the door frame, right, there's no rights that it has at all. And similarly, we find the same halacha if you skip the brackets. By a sosim, a sealed house, it doesn't make anything tome all around it. Rashi says, if there's someone who has died inside the house, there's a mace inside the house. So the fact that the door is closed up, it doesn't mean that you treat it in the same way as a kever. A kever, you can't come a kohen or whatever, anyone who wants to keep, or in time of anyone who needed to or wanted to live batara, and now the kohen would be osa. We know that a kohen cannot come within 4 amos of a kever, right? Of a kever, anywhere around the kever, 4 amos, right? A closed house doesn't have the din of a kever. It's only matame outside the house, opposite the entrance, the doorway. Okay. Porat says Petzimov matame kol sevivov. But if you remove the door frame, so there's no clear evidence at all where the door is, then it's matame all around it. Rashi says Porat says Petzimov kever. Then it becomes like a kever, like a grave. The Chazal will matame the whole surrounding area 4 amos around a kever. It was a gezerah d'Rabbanan. So the people who are only doing things in Tara should not come close to the kever. And the concern was they might, cause an oil over the kever without thinking about it and make themselves Tommy. So Chazal said you can't come within 4 amos of a kever, right? A kohen, right? Or anyone who won't have Tara. But however, if that will apply once the door frame is removed. But a house that's simply closed up, but it's not completely, but it's still got a door frame, right? So the assumption is that they will eventually open that doorway, the one that you can seal the door frames, therefore, and they will take the mace out that door frame. So therefore, it's only in front of the 4 amos is only in front of that doorway that become Tommy. The mace is in the house. Rabbeinu Gershom explains this a little bit more, and that's it. Basically, the halacha of the logic here is very simple, right? Something that is completely sealed, like a kever, there's no exit point, and therefore we apply the rule of tumah b'kas. The tumah just goes out in all directions effectively. So Chazal, the whole area, 4 amos in every direction is tumah, right? If you have a house, even if the doorway is currently sealed up, it's nailed up, right, and there's a mace inside the house, the fact there's still a doorway there means that's where, if you want to take the mace out, that's where the mace would go. And if you're standing outside the house next to the wall of a house, a kohen is not allowed to go into a house with the mace inside the house. The kohen doesn't have to, as far as I know, right? He can stand next to the wall of the house. There might be a problem, it's probably a problem with overhanging. I'm sorry, I'm not looking at you only because this is your field. But no, you have a problem with overhanging and trees and things like that. Leave that aside. Let's say there's no overhang. I think there's a problem with it if it's a building. I might be wrong, but I don't think there's an issue with the kohen being within 4 amos of the building. Unlike a kever where you can't get within 4 amos. This house is the same thing. It's the same thing, right? The doorway can't go within 4 amos of the doorway. Even if the doorway is closed, if the frame is still there, that's where the mace is going to go out. So we brought this brisa to support this point that when it comes to a door, something that's closed, that's sealed, and he wants to reopen to another alleyway, they can stop him. But if there is a door frame there, which shows that he always intended to reopen that doorway, then he can say, I still have my rights, and I want to reopen onto your alleyway, there's nothing you can do about it. Right? Good. No share next week for obvious reasons. Yom Tov, and then next week is Yom Tov Mitzvah Hashem. So the next year there'll be lots of other shiur on Yom Tov, but not this one. And then we'll Mitzvah Hashem resume the week after. Okay. Have a good week. Okay.
Thank you.